More people, great. Lots of people to listen to you guys. This is great. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Friday. We're going to be talking about psychological safety for athletes. Adam and Todd will be alternating. I don't know how you're going to do that, so I'll let you run this. Just before that, a quick announcement that we are launching our self-paced course next week. So you'll see this coming. Some of you coaches that are here have actually contributed to the self-paced course. This will be an additional tool for athletes to kind of like get a taste of our programs, but more at their own pace. So you'll see this available on the website for sign up, and then having access to it through Mighty Network. And we also have a group coaching program starting February 19. So for anybody who is interested in joining that group, you can send me or Katie an email, and we'll put you on the list for this. We have a few more spots available. I'll put Katie and my email in the chat. And feel free to refer other athletes or people that you know who may be either interested in the self-paced course or the group coaching. As a reminder, these are available for free for athletes that just need to sign up on the website on our sign up page. So I'll share all of this in the chat. And now we're just going to get on with the huddle. I'll leave it to Adam. Are you the one starting? You should be able to share your screen.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Everybody, let me figure out the screen share here and get us going. Welcome. Nice to see everyone. So we got here. Okay. Present. Okay. Let me see if I can see. Get everybody geared up. Can you see the slide now? Yeah. Okay, cool. Sorry, I can't really see let me sort this out. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Adam Boardman. I am an LMFT based here in Los Angeles. I know a lot of you. I can't see most of you anymore, so let me see if I can fix that actually. I can get some feedback. So all I see is slide. Great, here we go. I'm based here in Los Angeles, and I'm thrilled to be here today. And I will and we're here to talk about psychological safety and how it applies to athletes, how it applies to their experience as athletes and their transition out of sport. I'm thrilled to be here. Todd, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey, everybody. A lot of familiar faces. I'm Todd Adamson, a psychologist, kind of in the intersection of clinical and performance, based here in Los Angeles. I do go back and forth to Atlanta, Georgia, here and there. I'm licensed in Georgia, and I'm part of SIPAC, so we can see people in the SIPAC states, and have a group practice, elite psychology group. And so yeah, really looking forward to this conversation. It's an important topic in life, and kind of across the board, kind of a foundational component of living, life, and I would say the good life. And so, I think we just lost
All right. Oh, do we lose screen share?
I lost the deck.
Oh, hold on one second.
I see your desktop.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. I'm new to this. I apologize. Let me go. How do we go back? Hold on. I'm going to reboot this here. Hold on one second. Share. And where did that deck go? There we go. We'll see it now.
So we're going to tag team and tag in and tag out kind of periodically throughout. And then we'll talk at the end. And we really want this to be conversation, kind of an engaged conversation around this topic. And, I think there's probably a continuum of awareness and insight around just the topic. So we're looking forward to hearing from everybody here with your lived experience and what it means to you. So Adam, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is a conversation. If you have any questions, concerns, throw your hands up. If you want to contribute something, if something comes up for you, I want to invite everybody to take a second to arrive, notice where you're at, the room you're in, the chair you're in, my voice, Todd's voice. Just take it all in for a second. And also, as we start this, just think about psychological safety. What is that? What comes up for you? Just kind of notice that. Maybe you have a preconceived notion of what this idea means. Maybe you have no idea what it means. Just kind of sense that as we move into this conversation. So, just to orient you to what we're going to be talking about today, Todd, do you want to walk through the agenda?
Yeah, so we're going to go through these items here, and just initially talk about what how we define it. And there may be kind of a couple of different definitions out there, but we're going to provide one for today's conversation, and then look at how we apply this to us as people, like I was saying, in our lives, and as athletes, into the multiple identities that we all wear at different times in our lives, right? But specifically, we're going to be talking about this transition period, post sport into whatever comes next. Um, and and again, any questions as we go along, feel free to ask, and we'll also make time at the end.
Cool. So we kind of broke this down in a couple different spaces. So psychological safety or psychological safeties. This is sort of a philosophical distinction that uh, I make to sort of organize this concept as a way in for us to talk about it for us and our athletes or any other part of our lives. And the way there's like if you Google psychological safety, the first definition, environmental, is sort of what we're referring to as environmental will come up, which Todd will get into in a second. There's also other ways to think about it, which I refer to as more relational or active and more internal. Um, I find that those are really relevant, especially with working our population, but we're going to get a little bit more into that as we move through the material. Uh, Todd, do you want to take
Yeah.
through step one?
Yes, yeah. And so for me also I wanted to talk about kind of how I see this and conceptualize it too. And Adam and I were talking about this earlier in terms of these three components really being interconnected. And really we break them down into these different components here. But really it's all one, right? So you've got environmental, relational, and internal. And I see these as kind of like a daisy chain, really, in terms of the interconnectedness. And there's elements from environmental that show up in relational, that show up in internal. So with that, environmental. So what does that mean? Well, it means feeling safe to take risks interpersonally with other people, to speak up in certain conversations, in certain environments, work in a team environment, to have differences of opinion, which these days it's kind of a risky ground to be on, seemingly, and to have a difference of opinion. Um, and to be able to express ourselves and show up fully, in a way without blowback, without negative repercussions, um, or the pressure to kind of show up as a false self, with who we're not. Right. And so as the slide indicates here, this applies to teams, jobs, families, relationships, really any kind of system that we're in. We don't exist in a vacuum, right? And so we live in these systems throughout our day. And so this is when we talk about environmental, this is that context.
If I may, Todd, is that
Yeah.
I want to invite everybody to think about, has anybody ever here worked at a job? Has anybody here ever been on a team? Now think about what it was like to be at that job or be at that team. How comfortable were you? Or was it even possible to do the things we're talking about? If you were in the meeting, could you throw your hand up and be like, hey, I have this concern, or what about this? Would you get shouted down? Would you get scowled at? Did you know that there was unspoken rules not to challenge the boss or the coach or the team captain? That resonate with anybody? Yeah. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about environmental safety. It's that we all kind of know our animal nervous system is always oriented to how safe we are, to either be to direct threats or just how much we can sort of unclench and open up. And this was originally a concept that was introduced by an academic from Harvard Business School in the 2010s, or the aughts, excuse me. And it really took off because I think so many people have spent time in environments that are pretty hostile, that are the opposite of safe or inviting or collaborative. Usually this is, you know, the classic model in business is that there's the patriarch, there's the person at the top of it who's setting the tone, and it's all about them, and you know, you have to toe this line, and you're not allowed to be yourself unless it somehow fits their agenda. This shows up on teams too, athletic teams, or sometimes with parents, especially for, you know, the Olympic type athletes. The people in their lives who, you know, have so much power to set up a system and control a system, and how much of a person gets to exist within that, whether they learn to take risks, whether they learn that it's okay to be myself. So there's other ways of thinking about this too. So one way that I think about this with athletes, and I recently got to give a talk to a bunch of college team captains about this, was, and it was in response, was this idea of relational or active psychological safety. So the definition here, you can read it: how we conduct ourselves when, sorry, let me move this, so when dealing with confrontations in order to protect the members of or preserve the integrity of the group, the relationship, or ourselves. So addressing behavior concerns in a timely and respectful way. Let me tell you a story. I was giving this talk, a series of talks to some college athletes about mental health. And it was about, hey, let's talk about anxiety, depression. Let's talk about mental, suicide issues. You know, let's talk about substance use. You know, what are the things that are coming up in your teams? And although they were grateful for what I was saying, and they were like, yeah, we've seen that. That's helpful. The thing that kept coming up over and over again was like, hey, yeah, this is great. But like, what do I do about, there's this one teammate that's always late. There's this one teammate that's drinking too much, and it's breaking the rules of the team, and it's ruining the vibes of the team. And I realized that what a lot of athletes lack, a lot of young people too, is the ability to sort of have a confrontation in a way that feels comfortable or safe, even if it is to protect the safety of the group. These were obviously team captains to leaders, but that's the people to whom it mostly falls responsible for creating psychological safety. Is it safe for people to be themselves, to be comfortable, to function at their best? So a concept of relational or active is more like, how do we contribute to a system to maintain that? What's our role in this? Also, when we're in positions of power or authority, as a boss, as a supervisor, or as a transition coach, how are we modeling that? How are we preserving that? I can't see what's in the chat right now. Is there questions dropping or anything, guys?
Yeah, there's two really great comments. One from
Great.
Cohen, just giving some experience, and also from Nicholas around a really thoughtful and thorough commentary around autism and kind of coaching, and just making the point of kind of a general lack of training and coaching to create environments that are inclusive, that meet the needs of individuals on with autism or neurodivergence. Um, yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think to that end, just the training, these kinds of trainings, and more trainings to the frontline individuals, you know, whether it's it's coaches, it's athletic trainers, to increase awareness, which then helps to provide support and ideally increase the psychological safety.
I just want everybody to check in with themselves real quick, as you know, we've got a few minutes into this. We started getting into this material. Sometimes it can be kind of loaded. Just check in with yourself, and you know, how you doing? It can be maybe bring up some memories, like good, bad, whatever. I'm curious what sort of spaces or times in your life you might be relating to in this, if you're comfortable sharing. If you don't mind dropping it in the chat or throwing up your hand. Like, what are moments or like environments you were in, either a team or a job, where you really either felt like you experienced that or didn't? Does anything come to mind for anybody?
I'll volunteer just because I've had a rough work day dealing with this same exact issue. So within my role at work, it's sort of a newer space in the financial services industry. And so, um, feeling like, again, like it's not an environment in which that's where speaking up is rewarded all the time, right? Is challenging. And I felt today in a meeting that it brought me back to my experience as an athlete when working with coaches, like I mentioned in the chat, who did not welcome feedback. And it was something that was known and normalized. Like, oh, if you work with this coach, this is just who they are and this is what you do. And they're excellent. And so you just follow what they say. And so this really resonated with me because it made me connect the dots of why I felt that so deeply today at work. And so I think that it's something that definitely comes up in life after sports. And so having this awareness and this conversation is super helpful. So just wanted to comment that.
Appreciate that, Cohen. That's really good. Thank you. There'll be some more time for sharing. Oh, Todd,
there's just a few people have commented as well, just kind of speaking to that. Yeah, so great.
Cool. Great. Well, we'll have some more time to get to that. So a third version that we like to think about, and is internal or sort of ego psychological safety. Refers to how and if we allow ourselves the freedom to try new things, to be mediocre at something or new, to express ourselves authentically, or even to feel our feelings. You can see my boy Teoscar Hernandez is up on the screen right now. I'm a big Dodger fan, and this is clearly a picture of him not succeeding. Baseball is a game of failure, especially in the batter's box. Even the best hitters of all time, it's only 2 out of 5 they get on base. So you have to be able to tolerate this in order to grow. In order to put yourself in a position to succeed, you have to be able to tolerate failure and tolerate the times where things get difficult. And a lot of this is determined by our own relationship to ourselves. And obviously, people, y'all work with athletes. Maybe you are a former athlete. So you may recognize some components of perfectionism in this population of us as athletes. We tend to be overachievers. We tend to drive ourselves hard and have really narrow bands for success. This can have real consequences for how we grow and change. Todd, did you want to add anything about this, the notions of perfectionism?
No, I think this is a really a core component. Again, I think I see them all interrelated, but in my mind, safety starts with ourselves. So it's which may seem odd, but I don't, it's at least I'm trying to think of the pathway that I want to go into this because I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll talk about it for 1 minute. But we have to be safe with ourselves so then we can bring internally, so then we can externalize it and bring that safety to others. And we develop this internal ability to be safe with ourselves from our early childhood, in those systems, those family systems, those communities, and those cultures. And so, we move it from an inside job to an outside job. Um, and so I think this notion is really important that Adam, you mentioned in terms of uh, allowing ourselves the grace and the compassion when we're transitioning from one set of expectations or identities to another. And to kind of borrow from the Eastern practice or Buddhism of beginner mind, right? Is maintaining a beginner mindset to be open. And that space of openness creates a more cognitive, emotional, physical space to have fun, to explore in a safe way. And it's the kind of antithesis of the perfectionist expectation, and I often describe it as like, if I hold a bat like really tight, or a golf club or a tennis racket, my range of motion is going to be really restricted, right? I'm likely going to injure myself as well. But if I hold the grip appropriately, I've got full range flexibility and movement, right? And I'm likely to perform well. And so, mind body, it's the same thing. Where the mind goes, the body goes. Where the body goes, the mind goes. And so, uh, I think this is really important, and something that we're all dialed into to varying degrees. Is just this internal ego component of psychological safety, and in supporting it internally so that I can experience it externally and give myself grace, compassion as I transition and move through the different seasons of life.
Yeah, beautifully stated, Todd. Um, So there's a lot of ways that this can show up, and sometimes I forget that not everyone is inside my head, which is a really good thing, but also that not everybody spends all their days working with athletes in a mental health counseling capacity. But if you look at a distribution of high achieving athletes and perfectionists, the overlap is really high. And when we're receiving these people, when they come into your lives, our lives, we're meeting them at the moment where they are going from something they were really, really good at to something that's really disorienting and really new. And that is a very scary moment for a perfectionist. That when somebody's scared, they don't really function their best. As Todd said, you're grabbing the bat too tight. There's a lot that you're missing. So this stuff might be a little wonky, but understanding the underpinnings of where these people are coming from means we can see more of them and connect more of them and meet them where they're at. So as we move forward, um, let's talk about your experience in sport, excuse me. So whenever you were on a team, whenever you were competing, what was your experience of this? And who set the terms? Let's start there. Who do you think set the terms on your team, whether it be high school, college, professionally, on was it safe to speak up or be yourself? Who comes to mind? And who was it for you? Raise a hand, take yourself off mute, whatever works for you. Throw it in the chat. I can't see it, Todd, so if somebody jumps in there, please let me know.
Coach was yeah. Coach.
Coach. Yeah, the coach.
Coach. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting experiences because I feel like on multiple teams that I had been on, it was kind of different per person. It seemed like if some people felt safer um, speaking up, and then some people didn't. So I think that was an interesting dynamic as well. That didn't really didn't really make it seem like a healthy environment. um, but it did seem like there were some people that were like more favored as maybe as captains or as other people on the team to be able to be more open about their feelings than others.
So maybe like if there's certain people on the team who are higher status, maybe because they're better athletes, they're older, they've been on the team longer, they have more equity or sort of they have a little bit more safety, a little more status, right? And
I
that can
also think, if I may, Adam, I also think it wasn't just status, it was also the overall majority culture of the team would have a bigger impact. And so those who felt like they didn't belong culturally or they were slightly different in some ways definitely did not feel like they could voice some. And I've heard it and seen it both when I was an athlete from teammates and then as a coach where some of those athletes would maybe try to come and speak afterwards one-on-one because they couldn't do it in the group. And that's when they did, because I'm assuming most of the time they didn't.
right. There's also cultural considerations there. Sorry, go ahead. Who was speaking up?
I'll echo Katie's thoughts around captains. Captains are interesting because sometimes they're peer driven or voted on in some sense. But most, or at least my experience, most often than not, captains were an extension of the coach. So if you had an issue with the coach, it didn't really bode well if you had captains that were an extension of that. So some of those people you wanted as confidants, you hope that it could be a safe place to chat with them. But my experience was it never really turned out to be that way. It was really just an extension of what the coach wanted. And they chose those people because they knew it was that way. And I've led teams for a dozen years or so now, and I, it's difficult because you do relate to certain people a particular way, maybe a little bit easier. But I try to press myself to try to relate to the person that I feel like I'm struggling with. But I think in a coaching setting, sometimes I got so many other things I want to deal with that it's just easier to, put the captains as the ones that are thinking the exact same way that I'm thinking, and then boom, let it go. So I think like that's it's a tough place to be in a team environment when the captains are not necessarily the safe place to be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you're really speaking to, I'm really hearing a couple things from you, Josh, is that both, I really noticed how well you understood your environment. You knew the rules. There was unspoken rules and expectations. You knew the deal. Like, even though they're the team captain by title, they're maybe kind of an extension of the coach, and therefore, like, you're not really getting anything other than an extension of the coach. We all have a way and a capacity to kind of suss out the difference between what's spoken and what's unspoken. And also, you're speaking very clearly to things that can make you feel less safe and available in an environment. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Does anybody
thanks.
relate to that?
Yeah. Well, I want to add too, Josh, I think you're able to take away a few things from that in terms of being mindful of how you show up as a coach in your role, and being mindful of yourself, and that self-awareness, which helps to create, psychological safety for the teams you're in, the people you're working with,
Hmm.
you know.
Thank you. No, I think I had an interesting experience. I did have a lot of great coaches. I had some emotional coaches and some I had a very fortunate situation in high school times of having a great coach, only because during the day he was a school teacher, and then at night when he was our coach, he was sort of an extension of an educator, right? So he coached us in terms of educating, asked us a bunch of questions. It wasn't telling us what to do. It was always, well, what do you think? How do you think you should go? And really changed my mindset about a lot of things. And then when I went to college, I thought, oh, wow, this is just going to get better. But it actually regressed 180 degrees and went the exact opposite way. I think that's what made me really try to understand why is this happening? Frustrating, I think, for many years, probably 3 years of my 4 years there. Um, but by the time my fourth year kind of came around, it was okay. I understand it. I probably didn't handle it that well because I didn't wasn't equipped to handle it well. Because I was on this other trajectory of you know, I guess self-discovery, self-teaching in some sense, because I had been given some of those tools, but then it was regressed back to you can't use those things. You can't do those things. You can't ask questions. You can't, you know, be inquisitive in terms of how the team should do certain things or how you should do certain things. And it definitely set me back mentally, physically, a lot of those things. So, but I think if I didn't get that experience of what a good coach looks like, then I think it would have, I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but it definitely would have been I probably wouldn't have thought too much about it and just said, "Oh, okay, great, this is kind of the way it was." So probably assimilated more versus every day for a couple years. I felt like this is I'm bearing through this, um, but it's not ideal.
Yeah, I think that's really a wonderful breadth of experience that you're bringing to this. It is cool that you're owning it and applying it to your own teams, but just notice, I mean, we're in the transition business, right? But like the transition from high school to college for you, even, and how disruptive that was and difficult it was going from these two systems, and how you really had to reorient to a new one in a way that turned out to be pretty painful. Um, and I think that's common for a lot of people, especially as they go from team to team or coach to coach. They've experienced different environments where they may or may not have had the ability to make mistakes or screw up. Or the other part of psychological safety isn't just, can I screw up? Can I make a mistake? It's also the expectation of the response. So as we orient to the rules of a system, part of it is based on the information we receive. And if that information we receive is, you know what, I make a mistake, I miss the pass, I show up 2 minutes late, and there's consequences is one thing, but it's also what are those consequences? Am I getting screamed at? Am I getting sometimes hit? Am I getting cut from the, is my place on the team being threatened? What are the consequences that I'm dealing with? Which can also really impact how we relate to making any mistake moving forward. Because if they're disproportionate, if they're really harsh, if they're very injurious to us and hurtful, then that will impact how we can be safe here and also moving forward.
Yeah, and just to add too, I mean, it can make the difference with someone quitting, dropping out, discontinuing in sport, or continuing. And this plays out in youth sports, um, unfortunately, but it plays out in all areas. Also at work, right? Um, where, it's disheartening when I meet with people who basically are talking about being bullied by a boss or a coach. Um, and unfortunately, it is more common you know, than one would hope it would be.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for sharing. I'm going to move on here.
I wanted to say one thing about this too, is that for people, I don't know if Josh is in the same boat as me, but I felt like I've only had coaches who were fairly negative and didn't allow feedback. And when this is your only experience throughout your whole career, and often it's because it was the culture back then, coaches were not educated on the social emotional learnings, like it was just a different time. You have a tendency to reproduce exactly the same thing because that's the only thing you know when you go and coach, unless you've like taken the steps to go and see other ways to do things. And so I feel like a lot of coaches also just repeated how they were coached. This is the way we've done it, this is how we do. You just listen to me. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, Nicholas brought this up earlier in terms of just coach education. And, in reality, there's sometimes no bar or very low bar entry into coaching, right? I think there's work being done at different levels to help change that, but still it persists from, youth all the way up. Again, getting these individuals who are coaches, proper training, and if you look at it from a systems perspective, like, and could say without going too psychoanalytic, it's the parent, right? And so how is the parent modeling in parenting, i.e. coaching, right? Is it in a compassionate, supportive way? Is it kind of the punitive way, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of the old school kind of punitive coaching / parenting that still persists, right? And I just wanted to call out, Katie had mentioned that she was resonating deeply with lack of environmental safety in sport led to that lack of environmental safety in later relationships, right? So it can become a model that we unconsciously, maybe consciously apply that bleeds into other areas, right? Um, so yes.
Tanya, I think you're nailing it here. There's so much about this concept that if you're if you're into a little psychology nerdery, like would say, to speak for Todd and I, we are, and you want to apply this in another way, everything we're talking about here about coaches or bosses is also way you can frame this around parenting.
Yeah.
How are we parenting? Really, this concept from a certain angle is just taking a parenting concept and applying it to the corporate world. So it's just another way into how we're going through our day, how we're living our lives, how we're repeating or breaking these patterns, how they're operating on us. On that note, what we're going to talk about now is really how this affects us moving forward, which some of us have already spoke to, excuse me. I want to speak first to the internal experience of it, is just the anxiety that people feel going into new spaces, the feeling of being unsafe going through retirement and that transition. It's already so scary for anybody, even the most psychologically healthy person, to do this. I mean, of all the spaces I don't need to explain that to, it's this. We have a front row seat to these athletes as they make one of the biggest changes of their life, and it's already anxious enough. If they have an expectation that, as I work with my athlete soul coach, as I work with my new boss as I go back to school or whatever it is they're going to do next and figure out that's different. If they're expecting, you know what, if I screw up, I'm going to get screamed at, that's going to make this even harder. And so when it's made even harder, it can have external impacts, which is, it's difficult to grow. How do that internal experience impact these athletes? How is it going to show up? Um, are they more open to the sort of failure response learning cycle or not? And if they're not, obviously this is going to be more painful. It's going to move more slowly. They're going to be slower to actually get their traction and move forward. So what can we do as coaches, as the support network for athletes who are transitioning out of sport to address some of these issues? Um, I will kick off the first one here, Todd. The first thing we can do, honestly, is just modeling. It's normalizing what I'd like to say mediocrity in transition. These are people, especially if they're retiring as pros or Olympians, they're the best in the world. They're not only good at something, they're incredibly good at something, and they're used to being incredibly good at something. And now, oof, it's going to be a lot of they're picking up a new sport now, which is, the rest of life, and that is hard. And so just modeling it, normalizing it, actively engaging it, and just being just bringing it into the conversation that, hey, listen, this is what you're doing. It's normal to feel this way. In fact, you should expect to. Please talk to me about it whenever you do. You're not going to be great at it. If you do start to feel some of the anxiety, please bring it to me. If it's starting to become, too much, you're starting to really not be able to sleep, it's spinning out of control, becoming a clinical issue. I have support for that too, with the Todds and the Cohens and the Adams of the world. But it's really just normalizing it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. I go back to the developing and cultivating the beginner mindset to things. And I mean, as a former competitive runner, and from a very young age, I picked up surfing. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this. This is not going to be that difficult. Wrong. If anybody's actually surfed and starting when you're not, 6 years old and you're 35, not easy. I'm still learning. But I had to go through this process of like, my body should work like this. I should catch this amount of waves, and like, wait a minute. Oh, and then I had to go through. I remember once I was surfing in Seal Beach, and I was like paddling around, getting frustrated, and then I saw this guy that was just like he would do a couple strokes, and boom. I was like, oh, that guy. Oh, And then I realized like I'm not surfing. I'm just paddling around, being frustrated while I'm in the water. So, you know, again, I just give that as an example of myself coming, having to like, oh, right, okay, chill out, Todd. Like, there's a learning curve here, and that's perfectly normal and okay. So, yeah.
That's great. You want to go through point two there, Todd?
Yeah, so it's important to talk through the different scenarios where this is important. And just to continue, what Adam was saying around just normalizing this sense of being mediocre, or just I would say just the normal transition, where there's going to be challenges, there's going to be setbacks, whether it's surfing, a relationship, a business endeavor. It's important not to internalize this and kind of pile on the coulda, the shoulds, right? And I should be better at this. Why is this happening? With potentially self-blame and self-criticism coming up, which we all know just does not help. So talking to someone, talking to a friend, talking to a family member, as long as they're helpful in this and they're not going to mirror back to you well, you should be better at this. No, talk to your round table of trusted, support systems about this, which could be a therapist, which could be a coach, that you trust, and, externalize it, get it out there.
Yeah, that's anywhere help them find anywhere in their life they can notice this. One place hopefully they can notice this is in the coaching relationship. Step 3, coach them up. Y'all are coaches. Let's get in there. Do your thing. By that I mean you can model what it's like if they give you feedback or whatever. You can tolerate it, show what it's like to do that. Also, invite it. Have the relationship of coach and transitioning athlete be one where you really deliver on this, and so they can use this as a point of reference, hopefully. The safer they feel here, the more you'll know what's going on. The more you know what's going on, the more you can reach them. So whatever, yeah, and so whatever you can do to make sure, and whenever they reach out with something, whenever they stumble, to respond affirmatively, to not overreact, and to not have the harsh response, and will benefit them. Also, frankly, as you normalize this, as we talk through this, see the more opportunities you have to give them sort of ways of knowing that they are psychologically safe. Help them notice it. If they're in the new job, be like, do you think your boss can, can take that feedback or wants to know what's going on? Or you could say that to your boss. And they're like, oh, no. I couldn't say that to the boss. They're like, well, okay, here, let's talk through the skill of what it would be like to approach that. Maybe they're actually available for it or not. And, obviously that's a whole other question, but at least give them the chance to sort of be able to have a different relationship to the figures of authority that are sort of setting the terms here. So the more active skills you can give them or tools, the better. Thoughts, questions, concerns on this before we move to the next line? Anything coming up for anybody? I can't read the chat, so if anything's coming up here, Todd, holler.
Yep, you can keep going. Yep.
Great. Cool. So that's what we got, guys. Questions, comments, thoughts, high fives, whatever, whatever athletes like to do.
I was gonna add too, just in terms of something that I experienced several years ago, just working in different corporate environments, is it's almost kind of like these two paths or these two lanes where we in the United States, in the world, but the United States is where we're at. It's our economic system. There's big business, right? And the bottom line is capitalism. So it's to make money, basically. And so can you have psychological safety within the system? And there, over the years, during the dot-com period, there was a lot of kind of free lunches, and there were meditation rooms, and the notion was talked about a lot. Unfortunately, it's a lot less so now. But intrinsically, there was a lot of kind of dissonance, I think, where it was, okay, yes, here's your psychological safety, and there were presentations, and there were kind of efforts made towards that, seemingly, but the bottom line was actually, and you need to work, until midnight, and 80 hours, 100 hours a week. And so, how do you exist in that? And I think you can, right? It's acknowledging the system, kind of the macro level, and then finding ways as an individual, which may be challenging, to create that psychological safety for yourself, like we talked about, egoic or internally, within your work environment, with colleagues, with your direct reports. And there may be some situations where it's not possible. And there are people I work with where that's the case. And so in certain situations, there might have to be an exit plan to where there is a more conducive and psychological safety work environment. Or there's options within that system to where you can create it. So I just wanted to mention that. That's just something that I experienced, and that people will come, that I'll be meeting with, that comes up pretty often.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Anybody else? Just bring up anything else up for anyone else that they feel like sharing right now?
I love what Corinthia, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, forgive me if I'm not, but I just love what she brought up in terms of like thinking about where the coaches are coming from as well, right? Like, so are they feeling psychologically safe, right? And so I think also too, if we can give athletes that perspective, of like, this is, it's not just us that's feeling this way, but this is kind of this domino effect, right? And I think that gives perspective. And even myself, when I was just talking about my other situation at work, of thinking of that, okay, well, these people, like my coworkers, are also dealing with their own sense of expectations and concern about how what they're doing will be impacted by what I'm saying, right? So I think that that's always helpful, right? To realize that you are not it's a domino effect, and it's not just you experiencing that, because I think that can also help athletes possibly feel a little bit more um, comfortable sometimes, depending on the situation, in having that conversation, right? Of just like kind of approaching the subject from that perspective. But
Beautifully stated.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, if again, the coaches are creating the context and the environment and essentially the vibe, and if someone is coaching from a place of fear, right,
Mhm.
then that's going to show itself downstream, you know, in in a lot of different ways, that people have shared today, and I have also experienced myself from certain coaches. So, it's a great point. Great points.
I'm curious for the group, is there ways that you can see this applying in your work with your athletes, soul
Hmm.
athletes, the athletes you're working with through this organization? Is anything from this sort of seem like you can apply it in the next couple of days or weeks? And if anything is, I'm curious what that might be.
I feel like unification is an important thing because people need to be able to, uh, um, the unification of sports is should be a part of the unification of education, making sure that people feel accepted within the group, and that there's proper training for people, because unfortunately I feel like that there's a lot of lack of training, and a lot of times that leads to people getting bullied, abused, misunderstood,
Mhm.
and there needs to be better policies, and 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 even state legislation that can help uh, reduce a lot of the stuff that goes on.
Mhm.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I think in some ways, you're speaking to something so essential for people being able to exist in a non-hostile space to begin with, for especially for how they may just walk through the door, let alone how the system or the organizational works. Sometimes some parts of this concept are almost just sort of like, kind of higher level things. And obviously, those only really apply when the essential elements of safety and belonging are in place. And we need to do everything we can, whether it be policy or training or cultural shifts, in order to provide that for each other as people, human
Mhm.
citizens, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Nicholas, what you're saying too is really important in terms of key stakeholders, right? Who are the key stakeholders, right? In policy, legislation, et cetera, and top down, right? In terms of impact. So, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to share anything? And if, no pressure, but if anything else comes to mind of like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is something that might I can bridge this to the work I'm doing through Athlete Soul in the next phase.
So I have a question. If I'm an athlete, and this is more for people who are listening, maybe watching the recording, and I am on a team where, my teammate, like you said, is not pulling their weight, right? And showing up late, and it's impacting us and all of that. And or maybe it's even the captain who's doing something that's not helpful to the team. How would you guys suggest that I approach that as an athlete?
I can take this one, Todd.
Yeah, yeah.
Feel free to correct me or jump in at any point, but this is an excellent question. And this is an application of psychological safety as an active skill, and sort of and it really fits into a leadership modality too. But to answer your question, somebody's just out of turn. Somebody's doing something that's ruining the vibes for me, the team, whatever. Well, like anything, I like to default to some of my to the language that we coach up people on in couples therapy, which is maybe an unusual connection, but essentially what in any relationship, it's really important to get messages across that A, you're talking about what's actually operational, and you're not doing anything to trigger defenses. So the basic construction of this that I work with my clients is that approach the person and be like, hey, look, like essentially it boils down to this, is that when you do X, it impacts me or the team Y. You know, when you do this, this is the impact on me specifically. It's always best to just speak for yourself. You're not describing them, you're not calling them a name, you're not being like, when you're a big old jerk, or whatever, you're just like, hey, listen, when I heard you say this thing, when you do this thing in practice, this is the impact on me. And that doesn't work for me. Do you understand that? So you just initially just try to get on the same page with them. This doesn't always work because sometimes people can't hear it. Sometimes it's because people came from places where anytime their behavior was getting talked about, they were getting screamed at, or something was getting taken away from them. They're getting humiliated. So that's what's hard about this. But if you can slow down the game, focus on behavior, that's what people say or do, or they don't say or don't do. That's behavior. And the second part is really think about the impact on you. How does it impact you? It makes me feel really uncomfortable. It means that, I don't know, that like it wastes our time. When you show up to practice late, it means we have to start practice late. Like we can't start until you're here. That means that we have less time to work on our game. It means that I'm already annoyed when we start practice, when it messes with my headspace. Please stop doing that. That's one example. So it's a great question, Cohen. That's obviously a whole can of worms, but those sorts of things is that it really speaks to helping people kind of like keep the zone clean, keep the shared space clear, as well as on some level giving people a sense of agency. If you have at least one tool to speak up on, you feel less helpless. You feel less powerless. You'll feel less alone. You can do something about it. It might not work, but sometimes even just speaking up in a respectful way can mitigate a lot of those feelings of desperation or frustration. So I'm really grateful to ask that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't have too much more to add. And Katie just wrote, or maybe is there a way we can work? Is there a way we can work together on this? Yeah, good. Yeah, and this is something that comes up often. I mean, the last few years I've been an assistant track and cross country coach at Santa Monica College, and this has come up often. And I've handled it like Adam suggested it. I've had to also have sit downs with runners and kind of mediate it. And there are times, and there's been times when it's not as at SMC when I was there, but I know other situations or other programs where the coach was setting a not safe environment, and so the athletic director had to have conversations and kind of involving a systemic issues. So. But I think just starting at that point that Adam laid out is a pretty good place to go.
Cool. So just one last thing. Just want to say, unless there's anybody else burning to say something, just thank you from me, and I think I can say this for Todd too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your attention and your interest, inviting us in here to speak about this. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I love holding space and sharing some of the perspective from it. Thank you so much for your participation, thoughts, and feedback. We're going to turn the slides off here and kind of open it up to any last discussion, but I do want to just say, at least for myself, thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you to everybody that's commented and excellent, wonderful comments today, and for everybody who shared.
Thank you guys to both of you for the presentation. It's really great. And you had a quick question, Adam, about how that can contribute to athletes and what we do on a regular basis. And it impacts a lot of the one-on-one work as well as the group coaching work and how we interact with athletes and make it more accessible, open, relatable, both in our communication, written, virtual, but also how we interact with people. So it's really useful.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I'm just seeing the chat things now. I didn't know how to go to that while sharing the screen. I apologize. I'm still new to this stuff. So yeah, no, but thank you again so much for all of this. This is obviously kind of it's a big, squishy, kind of personal topic. So it's interesting to kind of see how this applies to our athletes, but also for you as coaches. I mean, I think, Corinthia, you brought that up, is that, our own experience of being in this space. I don't know how long many of you have been coaching, maybe a long time, maybe not that much time. Everybody's in process here. Todd's notion of beginner mind is right on the money. And so how do we foster ourselves to become better at what we do also is something to think about. But thank you again.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. And join us for the next one. Actually, we're going to be doing a live transition talk with Steve Davis, and our guest is going to be Josh, who is here today. So we look forward to that. We'll see you in a month. It will be March 6th, I think. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.